The morning I found my heated chicken coop unplugged in the middle of a Colorado blizzard. I knew my life in Meadowbrook Estates was about to get a whole lot more complicated. I had moved to Golden, Colorado about 8 months earlier, drawn by the mountain views and what I thought was a reasonable HOA that would leave me alone to live my life. My name is Grant Anderson, and I am a software developer who works remotely, which gave me the freedom to pursue my passion for raising heritage breed chickens. I had 5 beautiful birds, 3 buff Orpingtons and 2 Americanas, and they were not just pets, but also my suppliers of fresh eggs every morning. The ladies, as I called them, were my pride and joy, and I had invested considerable time and money into making sure their coop was perfect for Colorado winters. The coop itself was a work of art, if I do say so myself. I had built it with insulated walls, a heated water system, and most importantly, a temperature-controlled heating element that kept the interior at a safe 50 degrees, even when the outside temperature dropped below zero. Colorado winters are no joke, especially up in the foothills where Meadowbrook Estates sat at nearly 7,000 feet elevation. Without that heater, my chickens would freeze to death within hours during a cold snap. That particular January morning, I woke up to my phone showing -8 degrees Fahrenheit. The blizzard had started the night before, and nearly 14 inches of snow had fallen. I pulled on my winter gear and trudged out to check on the ladies, following the path I had shoveled the previous evening. As soon as I opened the coop door, I knew something was terribly wrong. The air inside was absolutely frigid, my breath forming clouds even inside the structure. Then I saw them. All 5 of my chickens were huddled together in one corner, their feathers fluffed up in a desperate attempt to stay warm. 2 were already dead, their bodies stiff and cold. The other 3 were barely moving, their eyes half closed, showing clear signs of severe hypothermia. My heart dropped into my stomach as I quickly scooped up the 3 survivors and rushed them inside my house, placing them in a large cardboard box near the fireplace. After getting the survivors situated, I ran back outside to investigate what had happened to the heater. That was when I found it. The heavy-duty extension cord that connected the coop's heating system to the exterior outlet on my garage had been unplugged and neatly coiled up on my back porch. There was no way the wind had done this. No way it had come loose on its own. Someone had deliberately unplugged my chicken coop in the middle of a deadly blizzard. The snow around my property was fresh and undisturbed, except for one set of boot prints leading from the side gate to the outlet and back again. The prints were partially filled with new snow, meaning whoever had done this had visited sometime in the middle of the night, probably around 2 or 3 in the morning when the storm was at its worst. I immediately called my neighbor, Frank Peterson, who lived 2 houses down. Frank was a retired police officer and the only person in the neighborhood who had been genuinely friendly since I moved in. He came over within 20 minutes, his 4-wheel drive truck easily handling the snowy roads. "Grant, this is criminal trespassing at minimum," Frank said after examining the scene. "Possibly animal cruelty, too. You need to file a police report." "Who would do something like this?" I asked, though I already had a sinking suspicion. Frank gave me a knowing look. "You got that violation notice from the HOA last week, didn't you?" I had indeed received a notice. Margaret Cunningham, the HOA president of Meadowbrook Estates, had sent me a certified letter stating that my chicken coop violated the community's architectural guidelines. According to Margaret, the coop was an unapproved structure and an eyesore that needed to be removed immediately. Never mind that I had submitted the proper application 9 months ago before building it. And never mind that the HOA had never responded to my application within their stated 30-day review period, which according to the covenants meant automatic approval. Margaret Cunningham was exactly what you would picture when someone says, HOA Karen. She was a 52-year-old woman with an asymmetrical blonde haircut that she probably called modern, but everyone else called the manager special. She drove a white Lexus SUV with custom plates that read Hoken, HOA Queen, I assumed. And she had made it her personal mission to make my life miserable from the moment she learned I had chickens. Those filthy birds are going to bring down everyone's property values, she had told me at the last HOA meeting, her voice shrill and grating. This is a respectable community, not some hillbilly farm. I had tried to reason with her, explaining that my chickens were quiet, odorless, and completely contained to my property. Several of my immediate neighbors had even signed a petition saying they had no problem with the birds, but Margaret would not listen. She had an image in her mind of what Meadowbrook Estates should be, and my heritage chickens did not fit that picture. Frank helped me call the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department, and a deputy arrived about an hour later. Deputy Rodriguez took photos of everything, including the unplugged cord, the footprints, and sadly, my 2 deceased chickens. He took my statement and Frank's observations. You have any security cameras? Deputy Rodriguez asked. Not yet, I said, but I am definitely installing some now. Any idea who might have done this? I hesitated. I had no direct proof that Margaret had unplugged my coop, but the circumstantial evidence was pretty strong. The violation notice, her very public hatred of my chickens, and the fact that she lived just 3 houses away with a direct view of my backyard. The HOA president has been harassing me about the chickens, I said carefully. She sent me a violation notice last week demanding I remove the coop. Deputy Rodriguez wrote this down. Name, Margaret Cunningham. She lives at 452 Ridgeview Drive. After the deputy left, I focused my attention on the 3 surviving chickens. They were in bad shape. Their feet showed signs of frostbite, turning dark and scaly. They were lethargic and refused to eat. I called Mountain View Veterinary Clinic in Golden, and Dr. Sarah Patterson agreed to see them as an emergency case. Dr. Patterson was a kind woman in her early 40s who specialized in farm animals and exotics. She examined each bird carefully, her face growing more serious as she worked. I am going to be straight with you, Mr. Anderson, she said. These birds have severe hypothermia and frostbite. Henrietta here, she indicated the larger buff Orpington, has the best chance. Her core temperature is the highest, but Peaches and Luna are in critical condition. Even with treatment, I would say they have maybe a 50-50 chance of survival. What kind of treatment are we talking about? I asked. They need to be hospitalized. We will keep them warm, provide Roman 4 fluids, antibiotics to prevent infection, and pain management. The frostbite on their feet is severe. They may lose some toes, possibly entire feet. I will do everything I can, but you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that they might not make it. Do whatever you can, I said. Money is not an issue. Over the next 3 days, I visited my chickens twice daily at the veterinary clinic. Henrietta responded well to treatment and was able to go home after 48 hours, though she had lost 3 toes. Peaches pulled through by the 3rd day, but lost her entire right foot and would need a special prosthetic to walk properly. Luna, my beautiful blue Americana, died on the 2nd night despite Dr. Patterson's best efforts. The final veterinary bill came to $8,347. Dr. Patterson itemized everything. Emergency examination fees, 3 days of hospitalization, medications, surgery to amputate Peach's foot, the custom prosthetic, follow-up care instructions, and special dietary supplements. I paid it without complaint because my chickens were worth it, but I was angry. Angry and determined to make whoever had done this pay for their cruelty. Deputy Rodriguez came by on the fourth day after the incident with news. We went to talk to Margaret Cunningham. She denied everything, said she was home asleep all night. But here is the interesting part. Her husband, Robert, was acting really nervous, kept looking at her, would not make eye contact with me. I think he knows something. Can you prove she did it? I asked. Not yet. We need more evidence. The boot prints were generic, could belong to anyone. No witnesses. But I am keeping this case open. Sometimes people slip up. I decided to take matters into my own hands, legally speaking. I drafted a formal letter to Margaret Cunningham as president of the HOA and sent it via certified mail. The letter detailed the events of January 15th, including the unplugging of my chicken coop, the death of 3 of my 5 chickens, the veterinary expenses incurred, and my intention to hold the responsible party financially liable. I included copies of the vet bills, the police report number, and photos of my deceased and injured birds. The letter concluded with a demand. Pay me $8,347 within 30 days, or I would file a civil lawsuit. I sent copies to every member of the HOA board, which included Margaret and 4 other homeowners. 2 days later, my phone rang from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. How dare you? Margaret's voice shrieked through the speaker, so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. How dare you accuse me of killing your disgusting chickens? This is slander. This is defamation. I am going to sue you for everything you have got. I did not accuse you of anything, Margaret, I said calmly. I sent a letter to the HOA about an incident on my property. If you are calling to confess, I should let you know that I am recording this call. Colorado is a one-party consent state. I was not actually recording, but the bluff worked. There was a long pause. You are a troublemaker, Margaret said, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss. You do not belong in this community. That chicken coop is still in violation, and I am going to make sure it gets removed one way or another. Is that a threat? I asked. It is a promise. You have 30 days to remove that structure, or the HOA will remove it for you and charge you for the privilege. She hung up. I immediately wrote down everything she had said with timestamps. Frank had taught me the importance of documenting everything, and I was becoming quite good at it. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for February 1st, exactly 2 weeks after my chickens had frozen. I made sure to attend, bringing a large folder full of documentation. The meeting was held in the Meadowbrook Estates Community Clubhouse, a pretentious building with columns and a fountain out front that probably cost more than my annual salary to maintain. About 30 homeowners were in attendance, which was a high turnout for a typically boring HOA meeting. Word had spread about the chicken incident, and people were curious. Margaret sat at the head table with the other board members. Thomas Wright, the vice president, Sandra Hayes, the treasurer, George Martinez, the secretary, and Patricia O'Brien, the member at large. Margaret called the meeting to order and immediately tried to skip over the homeowner comments section of the agenda. I stood up. Point of order, I said loudly. The bylaws require a homeowner comment period before any votes are taken. Margaret's face turned red. We have important business to discuss tonight, Mr. Anderson. Your little farm issues will have to wait. Actually, this is about HOA business, I said. I have filed a formal complaint against the HOA for trespassing and destruction of property. That seems pretty important. A murmur went through the crowd. Thomas, the vice president, leaned over and whispered something to Margaret. She looked like she wanted to argue but finally nodded. "Fine. 5 minutes, Mr. Anderson." I walked to the front of the room and laid out my case. I showed photos of my chickens before the incident, healthy and happy. Then I showed the photos from that terrible morning, including the deceased birds. I heard gasps from several people in the audience. I explained about the unplugged heater, the police report, and the veterinary bills. 3 of my chickens died because someone deliberately unplugged their heated coop in the middle of a blizzard, I said. This was not an accident. This was not negligence. This was intentional animal cruelty, and it happened on HOA property after I received a violation notice about the coop. "You have no proof that anyone from the HOA did this," Margaret said, but her voice was shaky. "I have proof that someone trespassed on my property and unplugged the coop," I said. "I have proof that it happened shortly after the HOA sent me a violation notice. I have proof that the HOA president has made multiple threats about removing my chicken coop. The police are still investigating." I held up the veterinary bill. "This cost $8,347. I am holding the responsible party accountable. If someone on this board or anyone acting on behalf of the HOA had anything to do with this incident, I suggest they come forward now. Otherwise, I will see you in court." An older woman in the front row raised her hand. "Margaret, did you unplug this man's chickens?" "Of course not." Margaret sputtered. "This is ridiculous. He is just trying to distract from the fact that his chicken coop violates our architectural guidelines." "Does it, though?" This came from Frank, who had attended the meeting to support me. "Because I looked up the guidelines, and there is nothing that specifically prohibits chicken coops. Also, Grant submitted an application 9 months ago, and the board never responded. According to Section 7 of the bylaws, applications not responded to within 30 days are automatically approved." Thomas started flipping through a binder frantically. Sandra and George exchanged worried glances. Only Patricia, the member at large, seemed calm. "Is this true?" Patricia asked. "Did we receive an application from Mr. Anderson?" "We received dozens of applications," Margaret said dismissively. "We cannot be expected to remember every single one." "But we are required to respond to them," Patricia said. "That is literally our job as board members." The meeting devolved into chaos after that. Several homeowners started demanding answers. Others questioned Margaret's leadership. Margaret tried to regain control by pounding her gavel, but no one was paying attention to her anymore. Finally, Thomas stood up. "I think we need to table this discussion and review the application records. Margaret, did you keep Grant's application on file?" "I do not recall receiving one," Margaret said. "That is interesting," I said, "because I have the certified mail receipt right here, showing that it was signed for by you personally on April 7th of last year." I held up the receipt. Margaret's face went pale. "This meeting is adjourned," she shouted and stormed out of the clubhouse. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Patricia O'Brien contacted me privately and apologized for Margaret's behavior. She admitted that several board members had been concerned about Margaret's authoritarian approach to HOA management, but had been too intimidated to speak up. The chicken incident had apparently been the last straw. "We are going to call for a vote of no confidence at the next board meeting," Patricia told me over coffee at a local cafe. "Margaret has overstepped too many times. The board is supposed to serve the community, not terrorize it." "Do you think she unplugged my coop?" I asked. Patricia sighed. "Off the record, yes. Margaret has a spare key to the side gate of every property in the neighborhood. It is supposedly for emergency access, but several homeowners have complained about her showing up unannounced." Last year, she let herself into the Hendersons' backyard because she thought their shed was half an inch too close to the property line. "That is insane," I said. "That is Margaret. She sees herself as the protector of property values, but really she is just a bully with too much power and too much free time." The special board meeting to vote on Margaret's removal was scheduled for February 15th. Before that could happen, though, I got a call from Deputy Rodriguez. "We got her," he said, sounding pleased. The husband cracked. Robert Cunningham had apparently been eaten alive by guilt. He went to the sheriff's office and gave a full statement. Margaret had indeed unplugged my chicken coop. Robert had been unable to sleep that night, worried about the chickens, and he had looked out the window around 3 in the morning to see his wife trudging through the snow toward my property. He watched her unplug the coop and return home. When he confronted her, she told him that she was taking care of the problem and that the chickens would probably be fine. When the chickens died, Robert wanted to confess, but Margaret threatened him. She told him that if he said anything, she would divorce him and take everything. Robert had finally decided that he could not live with the guilt, especially after seeing the photos at the HOA meeting. Deputy Rodriguez told me that Margaret was being charged with criminal trespassing, criminal mischief, and animal cruelty. The animal cruelty charge was a Class 1 misdemeanor in Colorado, carrying a potential sentence of 6 to 18 months in jail and fines up to $5,000. She also violated several municipal codes, Deputy Rodriguez explained. Golden has strict animal welfare laws. The district attorney is taking this seriously. The HOA held their special meeting 3 days after Margaret's arrest. The vote to remove her as president was unanimous, with Margaret obviously abstaining since she did not attend. Thomas Wright was named interim president, and one of the first things he did was formally apologize to me on behalf of the board. "Your chicken coop application is officially approved," he said. "In fact, we are going to revise the architectural guidelines to specifically allow chicken coops as long as they meet basic size and setback requirements. Several other homeowners have expressed interest in getting chickens, and there is no good reason to prohibit them." The civil case was more complicated. I sued Margaret personally for the vet bills. The value of my deceased chickens' heritage breed chickens are expensive. Emotional distress and punitive damages. My lawyer, Daniel Foster, was a sharp guy in his 30s who specialized in property disputes and HOA issues. "HOA cases are their own special kind of crazy," Daniel told me at our first meeting. "But this one is pretty clear-cut. She committed a crime that directly caused you financial damages. The criminal conviction will make the civil case much easier." Margaret hired an expensive lawyer from Denver, some hotshot named Richard Blackwell who wore $1,000 suits and drove a Tesla. Richard tried every trick in the book to get the case dismissed. He argued that I could not prove Margaret's actions directly caused the chickens' deaths. He claimed that the chickens might have died anyway. He even suggested that I had unplugged the coop myself for attention. None of it worked. Robert's statement was damning, and the police evidence was solid. The veterinary records clearly showed that the chickens died from hypothermia, and Dr. Patterson testified that they absolutely would have survived if the heater had remained on. The criminal case went to trial first. I attended every day of the 2-week trial, watching as the prosecution laid out their case. The most powerful moment came when Dr. Patterson testified about the suffering the chickens had endured. "Hypothermia is an agonizing way to die," she said from the witness stand. "These animals suffered tremendously before they died, and the survivors will have permanent disabilities for the rest of their lives. This was completely preventable." Margaret showed no remorse throughout the trial. She sat stone-faced next to her lawyer, occasionally dabbing at her eyes with a tissue when she thought the jury was watching, but mostly just looking annoyed that she had to be there. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge was clearly not impressed with Margaret's behavior. At sentencing, he gave her the maximum 18 months in jail, with work release privileges, and ordered her to pay $5,000 in fines plus restitution for my veterinary bills. He also placed her on probation for 3 years after her jail sentence and ordered her to complete community service at an animal shelter. "Miss Cunningham," the judge said sternly, "you callously and deliberately caused the suffering and death of innocent animals because of a petty dispute about property aesthetics. Your complete lack of remorse throughout this proceeding is deeply troubling. Perhaps spending time caring for animals at the shelter will teach you the empathy you so clearly lack." Margaret finally showed emotion at that, bursting into tears and protesting that jail time was excessive. The judge was unmoved. The civil trial was almost anticlimactic after that. My lawyer presented the vet bills, the replacement cost of the chickens, about $400 each for heritage breeding stock, and testimony from a psychologist about the emotional impact of losing pets to intentional cruelty. We asked for $50,000 in total, which included punitive damages designed to send a message. Margaret's lawyer argued that $50,000 was excessive, but the jury disagreed. They awarded me $47,500, which included the vet bills, replacement costs, emotional distress, and $35,000 in punitive damages. The jury foreman later told a reporter that they wanted to send a message that animal cruelty would not be tolerated, even when committed by someone in a position of power. Margaret appealed both the criminal and civil judgments, but both appeals were denied. She ended up serving 14 months of her jail sentence and had to liquidate several assets to pay the civil judgment. Robert divorced her halfway through her jail time, and she was forced to sell their house in Meadowbrook Estates to pay her debts. Meanwhile, life in the neighborhood improved dramatically. Thomas Wright turned out to be an excellent HOA president. He streamlined the application process, made the board meetings more transparent, and actually focused on maintaining common areas instead of harassing homeowners over trivial issues. Several other residents got chickens after my coop was officially approved, and we started a small community garden in the common area near the clubhouse. My chickens recovered well from their ordeal. Henrietta adapted to her missing toes without any problems. Peaches took a while to get used to her prosthetic foot, but Dr. Patterson worked with a veterinary orthotic specialist to create a custom rubber boot that allowed her to walk and perch normally. I added 2 more buff Orpingtons to the flock, naming them Hope and Justice, because that seemed appropriate. I also installed a comprehensive security system around my property, including cameras covering every angle of my yard. The coop got a backup heating system powered by a battery that would last 72 hours in case of power loss or unplugging. I was not taking any chances. Frank and I became close friends during the whole ordeal. He told me stories about his time as a police officer, and I taught him about chicken care. He ended up getting 4 chickens of his own and built a coop modeled after mine. "Never thought I would be a chicken farmer at 65, Frank joked, "but these birds are growing on me." Patricia O'Brien ran for HOA president in the next election and won by a landslide. Her platform was simple. The HOA exists to serve the community, not control it. She implemented term limits for board positions and created an oversight committee to prevent any future abuse of power. I did a few interviews with local news stations about the case. The story went viral online, with thousands of people commenting about their own HOA horror stories. I even got contacted by a producer from a national news show, but I declined that interview. I had never wanted attention. I just wanted justice for my chickens. One afternoon, about 6 months after the trial, I was in my backyard watching the chickens scratch around in their run when my doorbell rang. It was Robert Cunningham, Margaret's ex-husband. I had not seen him since he testified at the trial. "Grant," he said, looking uncomfortable. "I know I am probably the last person you want to see, but I wanted to apologize in person." I invited him in, curious about what he had to say. We sat in my kitchen and Robert told me his story. He had been married to Margaret for 27 years, and she had not always been the way she was during my ordeal. "She got involved with the HOA about 5 years ago," Robert explained. "At first, it was good for her. She had just retired from her job in corporate management and needed something to do. But then she became obsessed. She started seeing violations everywhere. She would drive around the neighborhood with binoculars looking for violations. She measured everyone's lawn ornaments. She counted the flowers in people's window boxes. It consumed her." "Why did not you say something?" I asked. "I tried," Robert said, "but Margaret does not take criticism well. She told me I was not being supportive. Our marriage had been falling apart for years, but I stayed because it was easier than leaving. When she unplugged your coop, I knew I had to finally stand up to her. I just wish I had done it before those poor chickens died." "Your testimony is what got her convicted," I said. "That took courage." "It took way too long," Robert said. "I have been volunteering at the animal shelter as part of my own attempt to make amends. The judge ordered Margaret to do community service there, but I wanted to do it too. I hope that means something." I told him it did. Robert left after that, and I never saw him again, but I appreciated that he had tried to make things right. The money from the civil judgment allowed me to make some improvements to my property. I expanded the chicken coop, adding a larger run and better ventilation. I installed solar panels on my garage to reduce my electricity costs. I even built a small greenhouse where I could grow vegetables year-round. But the best part was the sense of community that developed after Margaret left. Neighbors who had been afraid to talk to each other under her regime started having backyard barbecues and block parties. Kids who had been scolded for playing too loudly in their own yards were finally allowed to be kids. The neighborhood felt alive in a way it had not before. 1 year after the incident, I hosted a party in my backyard. I invited all the neighbors, including the ones who had initially been skeptical about my chickens. We had burgers and hot dogs, and everyone got to meet the ladies. The kids loved feeding them treats and watching them scratch around in their run. Several people asked me for advice on building their own coops. Frank gave a toast during the party. "To Grant," he said, raising his beer, "who taught us that sometimes you have to stand up to bullies, even when they hide behind rules and regulations. And to the ladies who survived and thrived despite someone's cruelty." Everyone cheered. Peaches chose that moment to let out a loud cluck, as if she was acknowledging the applause, and everyone laughed. I looked around at my neighbors, at my chickens happily foraging in their secure and heated coop, at the mountains rising in the distance, and felt grateful. I had moved to Meadowbrook Estates looking for a quiet place to live and pursue my hobby. I had gotten that eventually, but only after fighting for it. The legal bills had been expensive, even with the judgment paying most of them back. The emotional toll of watching my animals suffer and die had been enormous. But I would do it all again if I had to, because some things are worth fighting for. Margaret ended up moving to Arizona after she got out of jail. I heard through the neighborhood gossip that she tried to join an HOA board there, but was rejected once they learned about her criminal record. Good. Maybe she would finally learn that being part of a community means supporting your neighbors, not terrorizing them. I still have the photos from that terrible morning on my phone. I look at them sometimes to remind myself why I fought so hard. Luna, Buttercup, and Sunny deserved justice. They were not just chickens to me. They were living creatures who depended on me for their safety and well-being, and someone had taken that away because of spite and a warped sense of power. Dr. Patterson told me once that she sees a lot of animal cruelty cases in her practice, but mine stuck with her because it was so calculated. Most cruelty she sees is from neglect or ignorance, people who do not realize that animals need certain care. But Margaret knew exactly what she was doing. She knew those chickens would suffer and possibly die. She did it anyway because, in her mind, enforcing her vision of the neighborhood was more important than the lives of innocent animals. The animal shelter where Margaret and Robert did their community service actually contacted me about a year later. They wanted to know if I would be interested in speaking to groups about animal welfare and the importance of reporting cruelty. I agreed, and I have given several talks at schools and community centers. I always bring pictures of my chickens and talk about their personalities, their quirks, and why they matter. Animals are not decorations or property values, I tell the audiences. They are living beings who feel pain, fear, and stress just like we do. When we choose to keep animals, we take on the responsibility of protecting them. That is not optional. That is the deal. The talks seem to resonate with people, especially kids. Several students have told me that my presentation inspired them to volunteer at animal shelters or be more conscious about how they treat animals. That feels like a meaningful legacy from a terrible situation. Meadowbrook Estates has become something of a model in the area for how an HOA should operate. Patricia has been interviewed by several other HOA boards who want to reform their own communities. She always emphasizes the same points: transparency, accountability, and remembering that rules exist to serve people, not the other way around. The moment you start using rules as weapons, Patricia likes to say, you have lost sight of why communities exist in the first place. The chicken coop still stands in my backyard, now with upgraded heating systems and enough backup power to run for a week without electricity. The ladies are happy and healthy, producing eggs almost every day. I expanded to 8 chickens total, adding a couple of barred rocks to the mix. They free range in my fenced yard during the day and return to the coop at dusk, following their natural rhythms. I never got an apology from Margaret. I did not expect one. Some people are constitutionally unable to admit when they are wrong, and Margaret is definitely one of them. But I got something better than an apology. I got justice, accountability, and a community that learned to stand up against petty tyranny. The story made it into several books about HOA disputes and animal rights. A law professor at the University of Colorado, Denver, uses the case in her property law class as an example of how HOAs can overstep their authority and the legal consequences that can follow. I gave a guest lecture in her class once, and the students asked thoughtful questions about the legal strategy and the emotional aspects of the case. "Were you ever worried you would lose?" one student asked. "Terrified," I admitted. But I knew I was right. The evidence was on my side. Sometimes you have to trust the system, even when it is slow and frustrating. Every winter, when the temperature drops and the snow starts falling, I check the coop's heating system multiple times per day. I have backup alarms that alert my phone if the temperature inside drops below 55 degrees. I probably go overboard with the precautions, but I never want to experience another morning like that January day. The chickens have no idea how much they changed my life and the neighborhood. To them, each day is just about finding treats, taking dust baths, and laying eggs. Their simple existence challenged someone's narrow worldview and exposed a system that had gone rotten. They were innocent victims who became symbols of something larger. People sometimes ask me if I regret moving to Meadowbrook Estates. The answer is no. Despite everything that happened, this community became home in a way I had not expected. The friendships I formed, the positive changes we made, and the lessons I learned about standing up for what is right all came from that terrible experience. Frank and I still have coffee most Sunday mornings, trading eggs and stories. His chickens and mine have become local celebrities in a way, with kids in the neighborhood asking their parents for backyard chickens of their own. Several families have started keeping bees, others have built elaborate gardens, and the community has embraced a more agricultural aesthetic that Margaret would have hated. You know what is funny? Frank said one Sunday as we watched our chickens interact through the fence between our properties. Property values have actually gone up since Margaret left. Turns out people want to live in a community where they have freedom to enjoy their property, not where they are constantly afraid of violating some arbitrary rule. He was right. Several houses had sold in the past year, all above asking price. The real estate listings highlighted the farm-friendly policies and the engaged, reasonable HOA leadership. Meadowbrook Estates had become desirable specifically because it was not run by someone like Margaret. I still have the certified letter Margaret sent me, the one demanding I remove the coop. I keep it framed in my office as a reminder. Not a reminder of the conflict, but a reminder that sometimes the things that seem like disasters at the time lead us to exactly where we need to be. Peaches, with her prosthetic foot, has become the matriarch of the flock despite her disability. She keeps the other birds in line and is always the first to investigate anything new in the yard. Henrietta is still my best layer, producing an egg almost every single day. The new birds integrated well, and the whole flock functions as a cohesive unit. I thought about getting a rooster at one point, but decided against it. Roosters crow early and often, and while my neighbors are supportive, I do not want to push my luck. The ladies seem perfectly content without male companionship anyway. The greenhouse I built produces tomatoes, peppers, and lettuce year-round. I trade vegetables for services with my neighbors, creating a small informal economy within Meadowbrook Estates. Sarah, 3 doors down, is a hairdresser who cuts my hair in exchange for eggs and tomatoes. Mike, across the street, is a mechanic who services my truck for fresh vegetables and homemade salsa. This sense of community and mutual support is what Margaret never understood. She saw the neighborhood as something to be controlled and perfected according to her vision. But real communities are organic, messy, and full of people with different ideas about what makes a home. The beauty is in the diversity, not the uniformity. I got a letter about 6 months ago from someone in Texas who had read about my case online. She was dealing with her own HOA nightmare and wanted advice. I spent an hour on the phone with her, sharing what I had learned about documenting everything, knowing your rights, and finding allies within the community. She later told me that she successfully fought her HOA's attempt to fine her for having a vegetable garden in her front yard. "Your story gave me courage," she said. "I realized I was not alone and I did not have to just accept their authority. That might be the best outcome of this whole ordeal. Not the money, not the criminal conviction, but the inspiration it gave others to stand up for themselves." HOA abuse is rampant across America, with petty bureaucrats using their small amount of power to make their neighbors miserable. Every person who fights back and wins makes it a little easier for the next person. The Jefferson County Sheriff's Department asked me to speak at a community policing event about reporting crimes, even when the perpetrator is someone in authority. Deputy Rodriguez introduced me, telling the story of how the investigation unfolded and emphasizing the importance of Robert's testimony. This case succeeded because people were willing to come forward with the truth, Rodriguez said. If Mr. Cunningham had stayed silent out of fear, his wife might have gotten away with it. If Mr. Anderson had not documented everything and filed a police report immediately, we would not have had a case. This is how the system is supposed to work. I talked about the importance of evidence, of knowing your rights, and of not being intimidated by people who act like they are above the law. Several people came up afterward to share their own stories of HOA overreach, and I exchanged contact information with a few who wanted to organize a local HOA reform group. Life has a strange way of taking us on unexpected journeys. I moved to Golden, Colorado, to enjoy mountain views and raise chickens. I never imagined I would become an accidental activist for HOA reform and animal welfare. But sometimes the universe puts you in a position where you have to make a choice: accept injustice or fight back. I chose to fight, and it made all the difference. The chickens are settling into their coop now as the sun sets behind the mountains. The heater will kick on automatically when the temperature drops, keeping them warm and safe through another Colorado night. Security cameras watch over the property, motion sensors are armed, and backup power systems stand ready. But more importantly, I have a community of neighbors who watch out for each other and would never let something like that happen again. I step back inside my house, the kitchen warm and welcoming. Fresh eggs sit in a bowl on the counter, waiting to become tomorrow's breakfast. Outside, the lights of Meadowbrook Estates twinkle in the gathering darkness, each house representing a family that can finally enjoy their home without fear of arbitrary enforcement or petty tyranny. Margaret's arrest and conviction sent shockwaves through the HOA management companies in Colorado. Several boards implemented new oversight procedures and ethics policies, specifically citing my case as an example of what happens when power goes unchecked. It was not the legacy Margaret had hoped to leave, but it was the one she deserved. I still practice software development during the day, but my real passion remains those 8 chickens in the backyard. They remind me every day that standing up for those who cannot defend themselves is always worth it, no matter the cost. They are living proof that justice, though sometimes delayed, can prevail when good people refuse to back down. As I close the curtains and settle in for the evening, I hear a soft clucking from the coop outside. Henrietta, probably making her final rounds before roosting for the night. It is a peaceful sound, one I never take for granted. Those birds gave me purpose, tested my resolve, and ultimately helped transform an entire community. Not bad for a bunch of chickens.